Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's now afternoon. Very warm welcome to our forum session at lunchtime today, which is entitled Revolutionizing Composites, the Benefits and Challenges of Using Recycled Materials. I'm delighted to welcome you here today. My name is Malcolm Forsyth. I'm the Sustainability Manager at Composites UK, the trade association for the whole of the UK composites industry. And I'm going to be moderating this forum session this afternoon, hoping to bring out for you as much information that you can use as possible. Now, maybe you think our title of Revolutionizing Composites is a bit dramatic, but the truth is we need a bit of a revolution if we're going to have a truly sustainable industry for the long term. We need an industry that's a lot less linear and a lot more circular for the long term. And recycled materials are a really critical part of achieving that. So I'm hoping in the next hour, you'll have an opportunity to learn a lot from people who are already doing it, and also have the opportunity to ask questions, and afterwards, come and meet the speakers and actually ask them individually for their perspective on particular challenges that are involved in this whole activity. Now, before we begin, and so we're going to be operating as a sort of panel, so we'll be discussing between us some really important questions. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, say a little bit about who they are, what their role is, and their organization, and then we'll get straight on with the discussion. So if we could start at this end and just work our way along. Andrew, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so thank you very much. My name is Andrew Goodman. I'm the CSR manager at the Scott Sports Group. So at Scott Sports, we do bicycles, outdoor sports products, and I'm here as sustainability manager.
Hi, I'm Guillaume Perben. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a Swiss company called Composite Recycling. And as the name indicates, we are recycling composite materials, focusing on glass and carbon fibers.
Hi, my name is Erwan Faoucher. I'm in charge of innovation, research and sustainability for the group Beneteau. We are making a few boats per year from 6 meters to 25 meters.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew number 2. My name is Andrew Maxey, co-founder and CEO of Artega. We are a recycler of carbon fiber composites in the United States, specifically in Colorado. We've been working on that for about 10 years now.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Ross Hood. I am the Composites Manufacturing Director at McLaren Racing Formula One team.
So I hope you can see that we've got both a range of market applications and end-use sectors represented, and also quite a geographical variety covering the European and the US markets, so bringing quite a global perspective to this whole question of how can we use more recycled materials in composites. I was saying to our fellow panelists when we met that I often ask an audience how many people think that we should be using more recycled materials in composites. And generally, almost everybody puts their hand up. Then I ask them how many people are actually doing it today. And it's maybe 10%. So there's a big gap between what people want to see happening and what's actually happening. And our hope from today is that you will go away with ideas and with commitment to make it happen in your organization, to start using recycled materials in your composite parts and products. So to start with, I'm just going to ask the panel just to give us a little bit of an understanding of what are the benefits of using recycled materials. So if I could start with Andrew, I was going to ask you, first of all, just to talk a bit about environmental impact. And how does the use of recycled materials in composite parts contribute to environmental sustainability?
So I even expand this to beyond any composite parts, but using recycled materials is kind of a no-brainer that it will generally reduce the impact of a product, a material on the environmental aspect. So it's very straightforward. Recycled material tends to have a lower impact.
And how can you quantify that? What are the tools and the measures you can use to try and quantify that impact?
So on many cases, there's like life cycle assessments that are being done. in the composite world, particularly when it comes to composite recycling, the industry is quite new, quite fresh. So finding that reliable data is a bit harder. And as well, because it's a bit more in its infancy, it also means that the efficiency of the processes, of the stocks, of the transportation of these materials is not always as efficient as it could be for other more established recycling systems. So I'd say, yeah, the data is quite important. LCAs is a good start for that.
I think that's something you're going to hear quite a bit about, the real importance of data and a life cycle assessment, really critical tool to help make good and wise decisions. So Erwin, if I could come to you, just to talk a little bit about the sort of concept of the circular economy. How does the use of recycled materials in composite parts for you align with the principles of the circular economy, promoting the reuse, reprocessing of materials within closed-loop systems?
As you mentioned, I mean, it's a huge part of the circular economy. I mean, of course, what we need to think when we talk about composite, it's first to put some recyclable materials at an industrial scale, and then reintegrate the recycled materials into the next generation of parts that we will make. And if we can find a way of re-employing it without recycling it, it's even better. So yeah, for me, it's a huge part of the circular economy.
So I hope that really resonates for many of you, that that to achieve a circular economy, recycling and the use of recycled materials is really key. Now, you might have noticed we've got a couple of processors here who are actually producing recycled materials. I'm going to ask each of Guillaume and Andrew to give us a little bit of a perspective about material properties. And from your experience, what are the specific properties of recycled materials that can make them suitable and attractive for their use in composites? So, Guillaume, do you want to start us off on that question?
Yeah, so it really depends on the method that you're using, but our approach is to keep, for instance, the fibers as high up in the value chain as possible, meaning that if we can separate the resin and the fibers, like glass, for instance, like we've done already, and reintegrate them to have a proportion of reclaimed content in a mat, for instance. And then the mat, what is super important for us is that the reclaimed fibers are not different than virgin fibers to use by the operators. So when you do a boat, when you do a bicycle, the fact that the operators, for them, it doesn't make any difference. And you don't need to learn a new process or a new application for your fibers. That is favoring the adoption of the reclaimed content. That's really important for that.
So making it as easy as possible for the users to use the recycled materials because it's familiar. It doesn't change the process for them.
It is, but at the same time, the users also need to be ready to understand that the next generation will not necessarily be lighter, cheaper, etc. So that there's also an adaptation of where you can make a little bit thicker, it's fine. And then it's really a joint effort that we need to do. The user and the reclaimer and the carbon manufacturer.
No, that's great. That's really helpful, I think, to emphasize the need for partnership, close working between the supplier and the user to make sure that it is optimized for the particular application that they're involved with.
This actually helps us design the reclaim solution. For instance, we do work with the Group Beneteau, and we have for a long time now, because they help us know what is necessary, what is acceptable, what is not.
Yeah.
So it helps us design the parameters. It helps us really work on an end solution. It's like everything. You need to talk to your end users.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's really helpful. If I could turn to Andrew now, just to talk about on the carbon fiber side. From your perspective, how do the recycled fibers compare with the virgin fibers in terms of strength and durability and other important characteristics? And where can you see some benefits maybe in the recycled material compared with the virgin material?
Well, I'll echo what Guillaume said. The properties can vary depending on the process used. So that's something to consider. But the mechanical properties that we have been able to produce have been very similar to virgin carbon fiber. So that allows you a lot of flexibility for your reuse applications. One of the things that we really do strive, similarly to Guillaume, is making these materials a drop-in replacement for virgin carbon fiber. And to do that, we focus on the short fiber, the chopped carbon fiber applications, specifically in thermoplastics. Those are high volume, they're readily understood, and that allows us to really demonstrate the scale and capacity and growth opportunity within recycled materials. The other part that I think is important, we talk about properties, and you kind of touched on the economics piece of it. We cannot truly be environmentally sustainable if we're not economically sustainable. So the pricing of recycled materials has to be competitive with these virgin materials. I think many of the folks in the audience will resonate with the fact that there perhaps would be great opportunities to pay a slight price premium, but you'll be much more incentivized if you have something that's lower cost.
Okay, that's great. And actually, just touching on this area of cost effectiveness, I was going to come to Ross now from McLaren. We were actually talking beforehand about the fact you operate under a cost cap. So, you've got a definite constraint. So from your experience, how and where has the use of recycled materials been at least as cost effective, if not more cost effective, than using virgin materials?
Well, as you mentioned, we are working under a cost cap, but we trialed and actually fitted and pioneered a first F1 part last year made out of recycled material. And we do that within the cost cap, so it has to be competitive. We wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't. The types of materials we use are predominantly very expensive and low quantities. So for us, that's a possibility to use, and we want to keep working in that way. But in order for us to really sort of expand and scale this up, we want to sort of drive this forward. To drive that cost down, it's really important for us that we accelerate the manufacture of RCF to make sure it is more available and more accessible to everyone. It's still in its infancy, but we really need to grow and pioneer with it. But for our uses, and we'll continue to challenge it and put it on our car under a cost cap.
Okay, so I hope that's given you some idea of the areas of opportunity and the benefits that are available, but we know that there are challenges as well. So we're going to have a little think about the challenges of using recycled materials. So to start with, I was going to, again, turn to the manufacturers to start with, to Andrew and to Guillaume, to talk about quality control. And from your experience, how well have you been able to ensure the quality and consistency of recycled fibers to maintain that performance expectations that customers rightly have, that there's going to be a consistency of quality? So can you just give us some flavor of what you've done, what you've achieved, and what people can expect now in recycled materials?
Yeah, there are multiple aspects to the quality consideration. And what we often consider is that the recycling of composites, the technology is fairly well known, it's readily available. A lot of the challenges are actually supply chain. And the feedstock is a major consideration of that aspect as well. So we're able to provide traceability on our recycled material because of the feedstock that we source, and bringing that into our facility and then tracking that throughout our recycling process. So that's consistent with our work towards ISO 9001 certification. I think that's really important for a lot of the end users that want to see that in their manufactured parts. And then the critical quality criteria will vary by the recycling process of the recycler. But at Vartega, we focus on our bundle length, our bulk density, so how well the material flows, our moisture content, and then our binder content. So we will check throughout our process at our scheduled cadence for those quality metrics, and then tie that back to our recipes and formulas to ensure that we're delivering that consistency, that quality consistency to our customer, and then demonstrating that through our certificate of analysis that we provide with every lot of product as well.
So you're pretty confident now that you can demonstrate to customers, to users, there is a consistent quality. You don't have to worry about that. You will get a product which conforms to quite a clear specification. That isn't a challenge that they need to kind of worry that it's going to mess up their process.
Correct. Yeah. I would say with any raw material supplier, we have to have confidence in our raw material as we ship that to customers. So we can't tolerate quality escapes and have to give that confidence through demonstration of our quality system. So at Vartega, we have a quality and environmental management system, and provide that transparency and even access to our customers. They can come in and audit that and understand that, yes, we are complying with our system, and that system provides the credibility on the quality that they're looking for.
Okay, great. And if I could turn to Guillaume and just ask you for a perspective on the glass side. You're obviously recycling GRP and providing recycled glass fiber. What have been the challenges and how have you overcome them? And how can you give confidence to the audience that they can trust the quality of your product?
Well, I think Andrew said it exactly. I mean, it's exactly right. It's the feedstock. I mean, it's not like there is one big pipe in which all the waste from all the companies present here can be treated universally well. It's not going like that. What we need to understand is if you make skis, you're going to have a sole. If you make a bicycle, it's going to be different. It's just understanding whether it's production waste or end of life, and understanding the feedstock and the volume. That's when we can adjust the parameters and get a satisfactory output. But there's really no perfect solution that fits everything. We need to work on a case by case, the same way as composite manufacturers work on a case by case for their end users. So yeah, I completely agree with Andrew.
And I hope that's sort of giving people confidence that there's a really careful control of the raw material coming into the recycling process, the waste. It's carefully understood, characterized to make sure that the quality of the recycled fibers is then characterized and consistent. So if we maybe turn from the manufacturers to the users, Ross, I was going to ask you around performance standards. Now, how do you ensure that composite parts made with recycled materials meet the same performance standards as made with virgin materials? So give us some insight on that.
Well, it's a really important point, and I'm sure a point that many in the audience will be interested in, the safety and the final product you get from these materials. I'm glad to hear about the feedstock that is coming in and the quality processes that are in place, because they will be key for making sure that we can trust the materials that are coming through. Safety is really important for us. When we did our trial piece, we did that in conjunction with with F1 and the FIA, and we actually had permission to run it. We made sure it was a non-structural part. It was visible at all times. But in order for us to sort of scale that more, we're working with V-Carbon in order for us to characterize that content, trust what it can do, understand the material. This is effectively should be another raw material on the shelf. We need to learn how to use that, make sure we select it in the right application, and go to use it just like any other new material on the market. But this comes with some added bonuses, I think.
And I think that's a helpful point to make, that you need to see recycled materials as a new raw material with their own particular sort of blend of performance characteristics. Make sure you really understand those so that you can then select them for the right applications in your particular parts. So if we move on to think about scaling up production, Erwin, I was going to ask you for your insight from Beneteau on the challenges involved in scaling up the production of composite parts from using recycled materials. What have you found so far? What do you anticipate for the future as you start to use them more?
So I think it's with Andrew that we were talking about it a bit before. I said to him, making a proof of concept is extremely easy. You put your best player around the table, they will always succeed. They will take the time, they will manage it. When you go at an industrial scale, it starts to become more tricky. Why? Because I think some people already mentioned it, but you need to make sure that you have the volume needed of materials. You need to make sure that it's robust. You need to make sure that it's completely regular, that every batch that you will receive will be exactly the same as the one as before. We need also to make sure that we can use the existing tools. That's something that we really, most of the time, forget, but a company cannot have to change entirely its manufacturing system. So, and on our side, what we need to accept is the fact to be agile, and the fact that we need to accept some flexibility in terms of mindset. Not everything is straightforward, so you need to sometimes accept to be in a non-comfort zone.
I think that's really helpful. It just highlight there's a lot of different factors involved in scaling up the use of a new raw material, which is what a recycled material would be. And it does require that balance of adaptability and flexibility with some really clear standards, processes, procedures, and the like. Andrew, other Andrew, Scott Sport Andrew, I was going to come on to you just to ask a bit about consumer acceptance. The final consumer. From your experience, how big a problem is there, if any, with end consumer acceptance of recycled materials and composite parts. And you're making sports equipment, which is obviously going to be used by individual end consumers. So, do you see any problems with acceptance, and how have you tackled those?
To answer this question, I'd say I'd look at it where we use already a lot of recycled materials in other products, not just on our composite sides. And from that aspect, consumers are interested in it if they find similar qualities and they are fulfilled with the kind of expectations that they're looking for. When it comes to composites, and particularly on thermosets on bicycles, we're talking about lightness, stiffness, speed, performance, and these are the things that we're pushing on and communicating. If we're able to fulfill those same needs on the consumer side within a certain willingness to pay, then we've checked that box. On composite sides, it's a bit new, so we're relatively new in this field. We don't have yet a product which is using recycled composites. We have a proof of concept. But when we look at our other product groups, we have, I believe, in our textile and apparel, over 60% of the polyester we use is from recycled sources. We have a helmet which has recycled PC, recycled EPS, recycled straps as well. The consumers are more than happy to buy these products if they perform to the way that they're expecting them to.
That's great. So, consumer acceptance is there if the fundamental requirements of the piece of equipment are met and the pricing point is reasonable. It doesn't have to be identical, but it needs to be in the same region. Then consumers, if they understand what's in there, will readily accept the use of recycled materials. That's great. I want to move on to talk a little bit about processes and technological advancements and the like. In processing and manufacturing techniques, how have you found, and maybe ask Erwin this first of all, how have you found that you've been able to adapt your processes, processing and manufacturing, to incorporate recycled materials? And what have been the challenges and maybe limitations that you've found so far?
Well, as I mentioned before, it cannot be exactly the same way to deal with the recycled materials and with the raw materials. So we need sometimes to buy some new device in order to use it. I'm thinking about some new resins that we are currently using that is recyclable. So we need to make some investment. We need sometimes to adapt the way we will conceive our product. So if we are thinking about recyclability, we need obviously to think about dismantling our boat. So it means that we need to anticipate in terms of conception how we will make our future boat. And if we are looking more on the technical aspect, when we talk, for example, about fibers, you need also to think how these fibers will tomorrow attach to the resin. So it means that you need to really work on the chemical aspect, on the physical aspect, in order to make sure that, again, the product is conform to what the customer is expecting. The customer cannot accept any compromise. He wants to have some recyclability, but he wants to have exactly the same value as he had before.
Okay, that's really helpful. I don't know if Ross or Andrew want to add anything from your perspective about the manufacturing techniques. Maybe Ross, I'll come to you first. What's been your experience in terms of adapting and modifying processes to accommodate recycled materials? Maybe you found you haven't had to do that. So, just give us some insight from your experience.
Well, Guillaume's point earlier on about trying to make it transparent to the end user and the operators manufacturing is really important. And we found that with the materials we've been using from V-Carbon, and that's essential for us now as we get into sort of trying to transfer and this sort of migration into this new world. But possibly in the future there's some changes we may need to do, but for now that is quite an important step for us. And with the parts we have been making, we followed very similar processes, and we've been really pleased with the quality of the parts which we've got out at the end.
So for you, the actual experience has been that you've been able to pretty much do the same thing with the recycled materials as the virgin materials. You've had to do very little adaptation on your manufacturing process.
Very little. It's similar to any other new raw material. It's slightly different tackiness. It's got slightly different drape qualities, whatever it may be, but they are very small adaptations, and they're all within the remit of the operators to be able to use.
Good. And other Andrew, I don't know if you've got anything from your point of view you want to add to that around processing and manufacturing, adaptations that you've had to make and how you found that, actually implementing that.
Well, I wouldn't say so much adaptations to the manufacturing process. I think, as has been said multiple times on stage, the success comes from being able to put it into the current manufacturing process where there doesn't have to be new skills required, new ways of working, new tools, because that would be an extremely big kind of inhibitor about adding this raw recycled material. So finding ways, I would say, which have been different is the communication that's required between all of the different parties, the feedback loop that has to be given when one iteration of the recycled content is not working exactly as is planned. You have to then go and give that feedback loop, give them the information so they could adapt, improve on their processes as material suppliers. But also there's a big part which is educating people who are working in the field to say, don't be afraid to try this. It's recycled content, yes, it's a bit of a new material. Yes, it will have slightly different properties, but it may be properties we're very interested in seeing in a product. It could be increased dampeningness on a ski, for example. That's a quality that people would be looking for. So I find that is quite interesting because it's new to have to educate people about trying. And I think that's a challenge that we all face on a daily basis in the sustainability front.
That's great, thank you. And I was going to ask about maybe Guillaume and then Andrew, just to talk about it from your side, what the nature of the conversations you have with designers, part designers who may be interested to try. How do those work? How much help do you need to give a part designer if they want to look at using a recycled glass fiber, for example? How does that work from your point of view?
Well, from our point of view, it's not a prescription, it's a discussion. So it's about, we talk about the tests we do for them at the end of the life. So we can tell them, for instance, that when in the end of the life, we perform tests for our clients, they come with the spec sheet first, and that raises red flags or not. We say this, yes, this, no, and that helps them from the conception to say, we're going to continue working with this material or we're going to stop working with this material. But I was talking the other day to someone who makes resin for trains, composites, and they were needing the feedback to know what do we formulate or don't, so that at the end of the life it's working or not. If they don't have this information, the designers are blind. And so these two ways discussion is really key. And that's how they make our life easier, but it's the opposite way as well.
Yeah. So really important to have that conversation early on, so you understand their needs, they understand what you can do, and together you can try and optimize, your offering to them, which will work as well as possible in their application.
Yeah, and it is happening.
Yeah.
We do have these discussions with the next generation of products on, and it's already really nice to see that it's being taken into account.
Yeah. So I guess you would want to encourage people here to say, if you're interested, come and talk to us. Come and find out what we can offer and how we can adapt. So, Andrew, maybe from the carbon side, do you want to add anything to that from your experience of dealing with designers? How can you help them? What do you need from them? What do they need from you?
Well, we can't be everything for everyone. So we have really focused on developing a commercial product portfolio that solves the problem that we saw in the industry, which was a format for recycled materials. And what we've developed is our Easy Feed bundle, and that allows us to have a very specific conversation around those applications that our product is best suited to. And we found that to be very helpful to provide focus and clarity because we don't produce a recycled carbon fiber pre-preg today. We don't produce a laminate that can be thermoformed, but we provide a material that has great applicability in applications for additive manufacturing and injection molding. So helping then those designers to recognize what our capabilities are, what our material properties are, allows us to really inspire and encourage and support them in what they're trying to achieve with their products. And we found that to be very, very helpful. Sometimes the answer that a customer needs to hear is, I'm sorry, but no, we can't help you with that. Here are some other folks that can. I would love to, when we can't provide the solution, I love to send folks to folks like Guillaume and say, there are other folks out there that can help you with this problem. It's just not fitting what we're doing today.
Yeah, I think that's, you say, it's not a one size fits all. There's no one product that solves all the problems. Sometimes you have to say, actually, we can't do that yet, or we can't do it, and pass it on to somebody else. What I want to do now is ask the three manufacturers on the panel to give you a little example where they've incorporated recycled materials into a part. And just to talk briefly about what it is, roughly what sort of scale they're making it at, and some of the kind of challenges and they've overcome in getting there. So if I'll start with Andrew at this end. If you can just give us an example of where in Scott's portfolio you're using recycled material for composite parts, and just give us a little bit of a flavor for how long you've been doing it for, how big the scale is now, what are the challenges, etc. So maybe 2 or 3 minutes, if just sort of talk us through an example.
So I would say not very long and very small scale. That is the timeline plus the size. We had the opportunity to participate in an alliance called the Carbon Fiber Circularity Alliance, which was started by the World Sailing Trust, which brought over a few different sports organizations, kind of global sports organizations, the UCI, the Sailing Federation, I believe, biathlon, and I am missing one, tennis. And they brought each one manufacturer. So we provided them with a bike frame that had been broken in a warranty case. The company, Lineate, was able to chop it down and realign this tape, provided it back to us, and then we found the application into reusing it into a ski prototype. The good news was the skied. So we were quite happy with that. But that started a whole conversation where we were trying to discuss with Lineate about reiterating new tapes that could be better applied to our needs in our products, that would be more aligned with certain performance we were looking out of this tape. And we're currently working and developing a product in that line. And the ultimate goal is not to have this as a proof of concept. Proofs of concepts, as was mentioned by Erwan, relatively easy. You bring your brightest minds together, you give them an unlimited budget, and everything works. But our goal is to really make this a commercial product so that people will be able to see, this is recycled carbon fiber, it's in this product, I can purchase it, I can own it. And for us, that's the key.
Okay, that's great. And Erwan, do you want to pick up and give us, the Beneteau story? Where are you at the moment? What are you looking at? Where are you looking at using recycled fiber, as much as you're able to tell us that? And what's the status and the next steps?
Yeah, so we have different level of maturity on the different topics. So if we talk about the fibers, today we are working with composite recycling since a while. We are at a laboratory scale, and we really believe that we should be able to implement a robust and industrial solution within 2 years. Okay, so now it's to find the right compromise and know exactly how much we can put, how much we can involve in our product, in which part, etc., etc. So we are there for the fibers. When we talk about the resin, we are a bit further. For the resin, obviously, we are working on integrating some recycled component into our polyester resin. And also on the other side, and I think it's the biggest achievement so far for the group, we have implemented 2 years ago a recyclable material called helium from Arkema into our boat. So we have been the first in the world to do that. We made the first boat of 44 feet in 2022. So means, if I say something, 15 meters roughly. And in 2023, we started at an industrial scale. We did a new boat called Sunfast 31 design with multiplast. And this boat is fully recyclable. So that's the first time that it happens. And today we have produced 15 boats. We should be able to produce in 2024 40 to 50 boats out of this one. And we want to deploy this new technology into our other boats.
Good. So you can see that there's a real adoption curve now going up, particularly on the resin side, but with the glass to follow. And that will be in mainstream boat manufacture and commercial sale. So really encouraging to hear that development. Guillaume, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like to add that back to what we were talking about with the designers. It's not just the resin. We took pieces of these boats in our machines, and both came out perfect. And I really mean perfect. It's white, it's beautiful, and the resin works perfectly. So the result from the beginning, we could recycle it. So it's not just pretending; it's really factually accurate. So it's really.
So you've demonstrated that the boats now being made are genuinely recyclable. In your process, you've been able to recover both the resin and the fiber.
Yeah, and as a sailor, it's a bit heartbreaking to take a piece of boat and put it in the machine, but it's for science, right?
Yeah.
So it really worked well.
Yeah, well, that's very encouraging to hear. The real development, towards a fully recyclable commercial application at scale. So, Ross, from your point of view, do you want to talk us through a little bit about what McLaren have been doing, an example of where you're using recycled fiber, what stage you're at, and where you hope to go next?
Yeah, sure. So I've already mentioned that we had a bodywork panel. So that was a pre-preg panel, fairly simple part to be perfectly honest, but a good place for us to start the trial. We are working alongside V-Carbon to understand how we can better exploit that across the car. I've sort of mentioned the characterizations already of some of those material properties, but we have a lot of opportunities, even in just such a small operation as a Formula One team, compared to some of the size of the companies which are on stage with me here. It's not just about the two cars that you see on the circuit. There's the spares, there's all the pit lane that fly around the world and get shipped around the world as well as all the tooling and all of the equipment that we do back at the factory in order to produce those cars. So there's many opportunities throughout our entire manufacturing chain for us to exploit. Excited about the journey we've started with V-Carbon, because it very much is the start of a journey with them. We're only on step one of hopefully quite a few. But we are, as a team, McLaren have been sort of pioneering in this industry since the 80s. We were the first with the carbon fiber monocoque back in 81. We were the first with B-Comp in our seats for our drivers back in 2020. And we've got many more to come, and really want to try and pioneer this. It's important to us, and it's such a great opportunity with V-Carbon has been great to exploit.
That's great. I hope that's given you a flavor of where recycled materials, both resin and fiber, are being used in real-life applications. If you'd like to know more about those, do come and speak with our panelists in the Meet the Speaker session immediately after this, which will be over to the left there. If you'd like to know more about the detail of exactly what they're doing, where they're doing it, how they're doing it, obviously they may or may not be able to tell you all those details commercially, but they'll be able to give you some flavor, I think, of some of the challenges, some of the achievements, and what's coming next. But I hope you can see that there's a very clear pathway to a much greater adoption and use of recycled materials in the sort of applications that we've been hearing about.
Malcolm, can I
Yeah,
I add a couple examples? So in the United States, we have been supplying a manufacturer of 3D printing filament for the past 3 years with our recycled carbon fiber, and that's available in North America. It's available here in Europe as well. So that's been a great commercial demonstration for us. We've also got material in injection mold applications for automotive with a compounder that's based here in Europe but has a North American division. And that's commercial. That's in a structural component. So great application of stiffness and weight reduction for that vehicle program. And then similarly, as a demonstration, we've produced tens of thousands of our own demonstrator part for injection mold to show that, yes, this is of commercial scale, not unlike that automotive application. So if we have any cyclists in the room, come see our stand in Hall 6. We have bicycle tire levers we're happy to share with you to show you. You get your hands on recycled composite to see what that feels like.
That's great. So there's an invitation to come and touch and feel for yourself what a recycled part is, looks like, and how it compares. And I'm pretty sure that you'll be convinced that actually this looks like a really fit for purpose part. There's absolutely no reason to have any concerns at all about the fact that it's got recycled materials in there. It actually delivers exactly what it needs to do. We're going to kind of very briefly touch on sort of the area of regulation and the role of governments. And then we'll kind of bring the discussion to a close, and we'll have the opportunity for a question and answer session. So do if you start thinking about questions you'd like to ask, there will be the opportunity to do that towards the end of the session in a few minutes' time. But just to talk first of all about regulation and the role of governments, and I just wanted to ask Guillaume, first of all, what role do you think regulation and regulatory frameworks can play in promoting the adoption of recycled materials? So give us some insights from your experience.
So the role is obviously for end users to incentivize them to dispose of their waste, and particularly for things like sports good equipment, everything that fits in your car. What incentivizes you to sort it as opposed to just put it back in the municipal waste. We do see a lot of pressure in Europe because there was this exemption on composite materials from the 1991 regulation banning landfilling, incineration, and exporting of waste. This has been lifted in countries like Austria. And so today, the regulation is in force. So basically, since last year, we do have Austrian clients who have no solution. So they need to pay for storage for their waste. So that's a very drastic example, but it's very real. And we talk to them because they need a solution. Now, the good news is there are possibilities. There is what Andrew does, there's what we do, and it's coming. So this needs to be prepared. This needs to be a bit planned as opposed to just having to rent a storage area. So the regulation role is very strong. We also need to tell the regulators what is doable. Because if they don't know what they can regulate on, then it's difficult, obviously, to find a solution that is measured, appropriate, and efficient. So just having this constant discussion is also key. So really, between end users, manufacturers, regulators, we constantly have this conversation.
And if you look forward, what do you anticipate for the coming years? I mean, people probably have heard about the EU Green Deal, about some of the regulation that's in preparation at a European level. What do you anticipate looking forward is going to come? And what's the message then for people in this room? What should they expect? What they should be doing as a result?
I think of the example of the boating industry, and EU-wide, there is a need to find a solution for manufacturing waste and end-of-life boats. The French have developed this solution where they pick up your boat. It's paid for by an eco-contribution on new boats, where they pick up your boat. So the end users have a solution for the end of life. But that goes hand in hand with increasingly strict regulations. I know, Erwan, you're more familiar with this, but there's a really bigger scrutiny on the end of life of waste at the moment in Brussels. And they're really looking at this more like thinking, okay, we need to do a better job because landfilling and incineration is not appropriate. So we need to do something. What is a bit the question?
Yeah. So that's helpful. That's the sort of the European perspective. Maybe, Andrew, I could ask you to kind of give us a flavor from the US. How do you see the regulation framework there? Where do you think it could actually have impact that will benefit the development of recycled materials?
Well, that's a tough one because it's no surprise that the regulation in the US is a lot different than it is here in Europe. We don't leverage regulation in the same way with respect to waste right now. We have a lot of space. We have a lot of room for landfill, and our landfill costs are very low. So there are some exceptions, though. The state of California does regulate some of their composites waste. That has driven certain behaviors around increased recyclability of these materials, applications for waste to energy and cement kilns. So in North America, we do see that, especially on the wind energy side. So wind turbine blades, as they come down, there are applications for cement kilns to recover that. So we're seeing drivers towards that. I don't know if within the next 5 to 10 years we'll have regulation like Europe. But I think that I'm seeing some head nods. No, I don't think we will either. But it'll be interesting because what we like to do is focus on the economics and try and create that demand pull. So that's really what we're seeing in the United States is let's do the things that will actually incentivize the market so that we don't have to provide that regulation. Not that it's not effective, but just a different approach, different strategy.
Okay, so I hope that's been a helpful comparison, really, of Europe and,
Sorry,
and
Malcolm.
North America. Yeah,
Just wanted to add one point, and like one of the biggest regulations, at least that keeps me up at night, is the EU CSRD, and that's one which I don't know if you're aware of. Is you'll have to report to the same level and have the same kind of auditability as you do on financial reports. And one of the topics is going to be climate change, and we will have to report on Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, which is what we're talking about, Scope 3 emissions. And we will have to find a way to align ourselves with the Paris Climate Agreement, reduce it down to 90% of our emissions in Scope 3. And recycled materials is maybe one of the key parts of that one, because at least for a company like Scott Sports, around 95% of our scope of our greenhouse gas emissions, of our scope emissions, come from Scope 3. And out of those Scope 3 emissions, about 80% comes from our material choice. So if I need to kind of align myself with the Paris Climate Agreement and the CSRD, I need to find ways to reduce that material impact. And I think, at least for me, that's a really big one that keeps me up. And I think L1 too, by the way.
Yeah, no, I agree, because I have to work on the CSRD also, so I can feel your pain. And what I wanted to mention is actually you need to declare, you need to report the amount of biosource material you are using and the amount of recycling and recycled materials you are putting into your business, and show actually that you increase the amount every year. So,
well, I'm lucky I'm in Switzerland, so I have a few more years before I have to be regulated. But I'll look at your report and I'll see how you did.
So if you're interested to find out a little bit more about the CSRD, for those who are operating in Europe, a couple of people here are already grappling with that challenge. But let's be clear, the direction of travel is obvious. We are going to have to report more, be more transparent, and there will be an expectation that we're on a pathway to much greater use of recycled materials as part of lowering our carbon footprint, as part of addressing our Scope 3 emissions. This is going to come to everybody. So you need to be prepared and you need to be ready. I'm keen that we have some time for questions, so I'm going to move into the last sort of contributions from the panel. Really just from to wrap up some of what we've been saying, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to sort of give us a perspective on the longer term. So maybe Erwin, if I could start with you. Let's thinking about the long-term impact. Can you briefly just tell us, what do you see as the potential long-term impact of the use of recycled materials in composite parts for the sustainability of the composites industry in the long term?
Well, actually, I think it brings hope, because without this kind of solution, we are screwed. It's as simple as that. I'm sorry to be quite clear on the topic, but so it means that we give an opportunity to have a sustainable business for all of us. As simple as that.
Okay, I think that's a pretty clear message. If we want a long-term future, we need to be doing much more with recycled materials. So Ross, if I could maybe come to you just from a McLaren point of view, what would you see as the key milestones and challenges that need to be addressed to expand greatly the adoption of recycled material?
Yeah, well, I think we're in a pretty unique position and a sort of our name globally, and we in the sport that we're in as well. It's grown massively in popularity, and that means we can influence and we can help sort of move the needle on that and keep the conversations going in the right direction. So we are collaborating hard with the FIA and F1, and along with the other teams to try to make sure we're bringing that in wider. I think we've talked a bit about regulatory frameworks. They are needed for us in order to make those sort of steps in the sport, but it's also this is much bigger than any sport for us to sort of have across all of our industries and all of our businesses that is going to be important for us to abide by and get into. So I think we're excited about the future ahead. There's options and there's choices, and we're all talking about the right things. But one of the key points for me today is it's how do we get out of this proof of concept and make this a global an industrial change.
So really industrializing the use of recycled materials. And you've highlighted that your sport could be a really high profile kind of sort of shop window to show how it can be done.
Definitely.
Yeah, because it's got such a high profile globally. That's great. Thank you. Just thinking about, Andrew, if I come to you about the role of technology, what are the sort of technological advances and innovations that you think, could play a really pivotal role in expanding and accelerating the adoption of recycled materials and composites?
I think what I'm most excited about are the resin systems, actually. So recyclable resin systems, there are many companies here at the show that are advertising and marketing these materials that are inherently recyclable. And they all have very interesting properties and different profiles. But I see that as a great opportunity. If we begin with the end in mind, if we design with recyclability from the beginning, then that will lead us to more sustainable resin systems that ultimately will make it easier for all of us to recycle those products throughout the entire product life cycle, so manufacturing as well as end of life. I think that also ties back to a point that I appreciate what Andrew said with respect to the impact. Actually, although we don't regulate necessarily the recycling in the United States, we are seeing more regulation around embodied energy and emissions. So that's something for us all to consider, whether we're using recycled content or not. We're seeing that with product category rules and environmental product declarations. What I can tell you about our recycled material is we're about 90% less, 95% less than manufacturing virgin carbon fiber. So that really is the future when you consider where we're headed. We need to use lower embodied energy materials, and recycled reinforcement, whether it's carbon fiber or glass fiber, is going to play a big role in that.
That's great. Some really helpful inputs there. And Guillaume, if I could come to you, just thinking about collaboration, you've talked a lot about it already. What is the role you think that collaboration can really play to make a difference here? What are the collaborations you'd like to see growing and developing more to encourage and to strengthen the adoption of recycled materials?
Well, there's a lot of reasons to be very optimistic because the collaborations happen already. We have the pioneers of the subject, and it's not changing everything you do. It's adding the sustainability. It's adding the end of life, the production waste factor in the equation of design, manufacture. It's adding those elements, and the puzzle is complete. And the good news is the work has started. It shows good results, and it's not about saying we need to stop using that type of fiber. It's about saying we need to make it recyclable, because when you look at the life duration of those fibers, simply making them reusable 2, 3, 4 times is incredible. And the impact of doing just that, it doesn't sound much, but it's huge. And that work has started already. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be very optimistic.
Great. And maybe just to finish with, if I could come to you, Andrew, what do you see as the key role that recycled materials can play in your products and more generally in shaping a truly sustainable future, in the composites industry?
Yeah, so I think we've touched this topic quite a few times. It's decarbonization. It's also one of these topics which I find is interesting is that we're talking about something that was done 30 years ago in terms of making products, that we're looking for a solution. And the fact that we're discussing about recyclability for future generations, of designing for better end of life, this is already a great start, because we are already considering what is going to happen in 30 years when these products are now going to come to the end of life. And I think in terms of circularity, recycled content is important, but also finding ways to get those cycles continued, as was mentioned by Guillaume just before, doing it 2, 3, 4 times, reusing those materials. That's really where it's key, I think, in the long term.
That's great. Well, thank you very much to our panel. Now it's your opportunity. So we like to throw it open to the floor to ask any questions that you've got. So if you'd like to ask a question, if you could put your hand up, and hopefully somebody will appear with a microphone so that we can all hear from you. So anyone brave enough to make a start? We've got someone at the front here. Thank you.
Hi, Kelly Covington from the Sustainable Marine Alliance. I work a lot with the sailing industry, particularly in northwest France. And one of the problems we're hearing about most types of alternative material, but particularly recycled carbon fiber and flax, is actually that they're not drop-in. And you guys spoke quite a lot about that you're really trying to focus on making these products easy to use with the same processes. But we're seeing a real difference in success rates in using recycled carbon fiber. It's mainly being used in molds. What I work a lot with a competitive industry. And yeah, that's not been the experience. And with that, I'd just like to know what the suppliers could maybe be doing to help the industry, particularly the SMEs as well, who don't have big resource budgets, understand these materials better from a technical point as well. I'd probably add that on as well. It's having trust in the technical properties, trust in the environmental properties, and then understanding the processes from a different point of view, and how can the suppliers help the industry understand those points.
Okay, thank you for your question. I'll ask Andrew and Guillaume, I think, to probably respond to that, because they're the main providers of recycled materials, and then Erwin might want to add a comment as well. So Andrew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I would just say I think it's really important to set proper expectations for how those materials can be reused. If, for example, we are talking about recycling a ship or a yacht, a lot of continuous fiber has gone into that. In the disassembly and recycling process, we're going to have shorter fiber lengths, and that does result in that slightly different reuse. So recognizing that certain industries will have different reuse expectations is really important, and helping the designers and the customers understand that up front, I think, is a big part of that.
Okay, Guillaume, do you want to add a comment?
We didn't have much experience with carbon fibers. We know it works, but we focused mostly on glass. I guess it's about setting expectations with the material you get and the performance you get out of it, I suppose.
I don't know, Erwin, do you want to just give a perspective from your experience, obviously, as a boat manufacturer?
Yeah, well, we don't use a lot of carbon fiber, so I cannot really go into detail. But maybe there is one topic that we need to put on the table. It's to really redefine performance. Because if we are putting carbon fiber, it's to have a lighter boat at the beginning. Is it really needy? I'm just putting it like that because at the end of the day, I think that's one of the parts of the deal we are not talking about. But I think we need to redefine exactly what we want to achieve for tomorrow.
Okay, I hope that's given you some thoughts. Maybe there's a further conversation to happen afterwards if you want to come and see us in the Meet the Speaker session. Any other questions? Yes, one in the middle.
Thank you. Hello? Yes. Good afternoon, Jim Thomason from the University of Strathclyde. First of all, I want to commend the panel for everything that they're doing and everything that they're saying, and I agree with almost everything you guys have said. However, I cannot be as optimistic as you because the big elephant in the room is post-consumer end-of-life glass fiber reinforced composites, not what we're going to make to be recycled in 20 years. The biggest threat to the image, I believe, of the composite industry is all of that post-end-of-life waste that is. We're talking hundreds of thousands of tons per annum of composite materials based on glass fiber. And glass fiber is very challenging economically. Okay, I won't say carbon fiber recycling is easier, but at least the economics is there. The performance of most recycled glass fiber is very poor. And as I say, the volumes are enormous. So what can you do to help my optimism for the composites industry in the short term?
Anyone in the panel want to take that on?
Yes. I would like to start because I'm saying this from Switzerland, so it's much easier to be neutral. You should go to France and check the Association pour la Plaisance éco-responsable. Erwan is particularly knowledgeable about this. We don't have this in Switzerland. We wish we had, but an entire end-of-life structure for all these boats, and in the UK, there's a lot of them. We talk to the National Composite Center a lot. This is by far, and the European Union is looking at what the French are doing, because this is by far the most advanced initiative, and it works.
Thank you. So I am president of this association, so I know a bit about this topic. So basically what you need to know, it's in France, we dismantle 3,000 boats per year. We are the only country who is doing that in the world. And as mentioned Guillaume before, how we do that is we contribute every time that we are putting on the market a boat, we pay a tax called eco-contribution that will help to dismantle the boat at the end of its life. And it didn't appear today. Basically, we started to pay this eco-contribution for the boats that need to be dismantled now, okay? And without that, we cannot achieve what you are talking about. I agree with you. If you don't have this tool, forget about recyclability. So for the boat industry, we really focused at the beginning on putting this kind of system, make it robust. Now ask Europe to follow us, and that's a big topic. And then you have some people like Composite Recycling will help us to put the tool into this kind of place in order to help us to recycle the fibers.
Okay, so we need the legislators to help us and not just
I agree.
to make these
Well,
restrictions.
we are actually going in Brussels for this topic with Guillaume in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful kind of example of where the industry has taken an initiative. They've established an infrastructure and it's being paid for by a charge on new products being put on the market is paying for the cost of disassembling those which are reaching the end of life. And I think that type of model will be needed more in other sectors as well. It may not work in every one, and there's still a problem with waste that ends up in municipal waste. That's going to be a challenge, and we need to work with the waste managers to find solutions there. But the more that the technologies develop and are commercialized, the more options are going to be available. But it's a long-term challenge, and I agree, if we don't solve it, it's definitely a threat to the long-term viability of the industry, no question. We need solutions in the coming years. Any more questions? One more.
Okay, Bernhard Heimer from Anritz from Austria. So thank you very much for this very interesting insights we received. I would have one question. I mean, we talked now quite a lot about the reuse of carbon fibers. What I would be interested is, what do you see as the most promising technology now or in the future to recycle these carbon fibers and to separate the fiber from the resin or the matrix and to make the fiber itself reusable?
Okay, obviously we have a carbon fiber recycler here, so I'm sure Andrew's going to say, I've got a process which is here and running, but do you want to give us a sort of industry perspective on that? And then I'll maybe ask one or two people who are using carbon fiber for their thoughts as well. So Andrew, do you want to start?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Generally speaking, we have mechanical, we have thermal, and we have chemical recycling techniques for composites. At Vartega, we focused on the mechanical and the chemical recycling, so that would be my bias, as those are wonderful technologies. That being said, the thermal technology, pyrolysis or thermolysis, depending on which you're using, is very effective. Is very effective at cured composites, end-of-life composites. So I would say there's no silver bullet for composites recycling. We need all of these technologies, and they have different applicability depending on the different feedstocks that are being recycled. So what Guillaume is doing is wonderful, and we need each other. The industry needs all of us.
I don't know if maybe, Guillaume, do you want to add to that?
If I might, to Andrew saying, yes, it depends on what you want to do with your fibers, because we can take old waste, whether it's Andrew or us, but the length of the fibers we're going to get depends on what was put in the beginning. So that's the beginning of the question, is what do you want to do with that after that? You cannot get from a piece of carbon or glass, whatever, longer fibers than were put in the origin. So otherwise it's magic, right? So you need to decide what you're going to do with this in the end.
Andrew.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about this earlier in the room in the back. There's not one silver bullet for sustainability, because if it existed, we wouldn't have this panel discussion in front of you, because we would all be pursuing that one silver bullet, and we wouldn't be presenting the diversity of opportunities, applications, materials, and etc. So yeah, I'd say I'm no expert on the chemical side or the engineering side as a sustainability expert, but it's also, we need all the different solutions to be able to achieve different objectives that way.
Ross, do you want to add anything as a carbon fiber user?
Yeah, maybe just one further point. I think we talked a bit about trying to industrialize it. Sorry, I can't see, there's a camera in the way. We were talking a lot about trying to industrialize the process. And one thing we're learning, but we're not very good at yet, and this is from me in a manufacturing world, is how do we segregate a lot of the waste accordingly before we then deliver that as feedstock? Because I think we definitely need to take some of that responsibility on, rather than lump all of that onto Andrew and Guillaume's teams. And I think that's an important part of how it sits inside our work processes, and no longer just have, well, that's all now waste, or that all now needs to go and recycled, but actually have that built into once you cut fiber, once you pull plies apart, or once you cut them on a kit cutting machine from Zoom, what do you do with all of the other offcuts that are in there, and how you got to dispose of that appropriately and correctly to allow us to create the infrastructure to have the right materials, which will provide consistent materials back to us again. Like, there's no right answer. There's not one silver bullet, which has been mentioned. But yeah, I think that's sort of on us to make sure we do that part well. And it'll be important for the longevity of this project.
I hope that's been helpful. The lights in front of me had turned red a few minutes ago, so I better bring this session to a close now. But I want to say thank you very much for all of you for joining us today. I hope it's been useful. I really want you to go away thinking we need to be looking at using recycled materials in our manufacturing. If we haven't achieved that, then actually we've kind of failed, because we want you to be inspired to go out and start doing more with recycled materials. There is the Meet the Speaker opportunity, so if you'd like to talk to us further, do come and see us over here to my left, and we'll be over there for about 15 to 20 minutes or so, or really as long as people want to chat to us probably, immediately after this session. Thank you very much for coming. Just a thought to leave you with. We hear a lot about decarbonization, about net zero. The truth is net zero needs a high degree of circularity as well to be achieved. We're not going to get to net zero if we continue to consume loads and loads and loads of virgin raw materials. We need to become much more circular if we're going to achieve our net zero goals. To be more circular as an industry and as a global economy, we have to be recycling and reusing what we already have much more. Okay, so I hope with that incentive, you will all be going back from this show thinking, where are we going to start looking at using recycled materials? That's my challenge. And so when we have a session like this again, and I ask how many people are actually using recycled materials, a third of the room, a half of the room, and hopefully one day the whole room put their hand up and saying, yeah, we do, because that is what we're going to need as an industry. So thank you for coming. Thank you to my fellow panelists. I hope you found the conversation interesting, and please enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks very much.